Amelia Khan never thought her life would entangle with the world of the wealthy, the kind of world she only ever glimpsed from bus windows or glossy magazine covers, but fate, as always, had its way of pulling the ordinary into the extraordinary, and that morning it began with nothing more than a phone call from her younger sister, Hania, who sounded breathless and desperate as she pleaded, "Amelia, please, just for today, I need you. I can't go to work, I'm running a fever, and if I miss another shift, Mr. Malik will fire me. You have to go in my place. Just stay with the little girl, play with her, feed her, that's all." And Amelia, who had been planning on spending her day quietly preparing for yet another round of disappointing job interviews, couldn't find it in her heart to say no, because Hania was more than a sister. She was the one person Amelia had sworn to protect ever since their parents had died years ago, leaving them to face the cruel world together, and so she said yes, pulling on her modest clothes, tucking her hair into a neat bun, and grabbing her worn purse before stepping out into the bustling city that smelled of exhaust fumes, roasted corn, and rain from the night before, her heart uneasy but her determination firm, because if her sister needed her, then she would be there. She boarded the bus that rattled through the streets, and while others chatted, scrolled through their phones, or dozed against windows, Amelia sat with her thoughts, trying to calm the growing nervousness in her chest, because she had never once set foot inside the Malik mansion, but she had heard stories from Hania, stories of the grand marble floors, the endless chandeliers, the kind of wealth that ordinary people like her could only imagine, and above all, the stern presence of CEO Ryan Malik, a man Hania had never spoken to directly but whose aura hung over the household like an unspoken rule, a man described in newspapers as ruthless in business, commanding, and untouchable, and Amelia told herself she would not have to see him. She would simply watch the child, pass the day, and leave quietly before anyone important noticed her. When the bus screeched to a halt near the towering gates, Amelia stepped down and looked up, momentarily overwhelmed, for the Malik estate rose above the city like a fortress, iron gates taller than man guarded by uniformed security, and behind them stretched driveways lined with manicured hedges, fountains that sparkled under the morning sun, and in the distance, a mansion so enormous it seemed to swallow the horizon. She clutched her bag tighter, whispered a small prayer under her breath, and approached the gate, where the guard gave her a skeptical look, checked her name against his list, and finally allowed her in after confirming she was Hania's replacement. With each step up the stone driveway, Amelia felt smaller, her shoes clicking against perfection itself, and when the front doors opened to reveal gleaming marble floors and chandeliers glittering like captured starlight, she wondered briefly if she had made a mistake agreeing to this, but it was too late now. A maid led her upstairs, explaining in hurried tones that the child, Alina, was already awake and waiting in the playroom, then disappeared down the hall, leaving Amelia standing in the doorway of a sunlit room filled with dolls, stuffed animals, and bookshelves that nearly reached the ceiling. And there, in the middle of the rug, sat a little girl, her hair a soft cascade of curls, her eyes wide and brown like melted chocolate, her tiny hands arranging building blocks into crooked towers. Amelia's heart softened immediately, for children had that effect on her, and she knelt down, forcing a smile into her anxious face, and said gently, "Hello, Alina, I'm Amelia. I'll be taking care of you today." But before she could finish, the child's eyes widened even more, her mouth formed a perfect circle, and in a heartbeat she jumped to her feet, ran forward with surprising speed, and threw her little arms around Amelia's waist, crying out with a voice trembling between joy and tears, "Mommy!" Amelia froze, her body stiff, her breath catching in her throat as she looked down at the small girl clinging desperately to her, calling her a word she had no right to claim, and she whispered quickly, "No, sweetheart, I'm not your mommy, I'm just here to play with you." But Alina shook her head fiercely, her curls bouncing, her grip tightening as though afraid Amelia would vanish into thin air, and she cried, "No, you're my mommy, I knew you'd come back, I told Daddy you would." Panic swept through Amelia, her thoughts racing in 1,000 directions, because this was not in Hania's description of the job, this was not something she knew how to handle, and she gently tried to loosen Alina's hold, whispering soft reassurances, when suddenly a deep voice sliced through the air, firm and commanding, carrying the weight of authority that instantly stilled every muscle in her body. "What did you just call her?" Amelia turned slowly, her heart pounding so violently she feared it might leap out of her chest, and there in the doorway stood Ryan Malik himself, taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered, dressed in a suit so sharply cut it seemed to belong to another world, his presence radiating power and cold precision, his dark eyes fixed upon her with an intensity that burned through her very skin. Alina, oblivious to the storm brewing, turned happily toward him while still clutching Amelia's waist and announced, "Daddy, look." Mommy came back. The words echoed in the vast room, reverberating against Amelia's ears until she felt dizzy, and she opened her mouth to protest, to explain, to insist that it was all a misunderstanding, but Ryan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and he took a step into the room, his polished shoes silent against the rug, his aura suffocating in its gravity as he demanded in a low, dangerous tone, "Who are you? And why is my daughter calling you mommy?" Amelia's lips trembled, her hands shaking as she tried to form words. "Yeah, I'm just here to help my sister. She couldn't come today, so yeah." But before she could finish, Alina's tiny voice broke through again, pleading, "Please don't leave me again, mommy, please stay," and she buried her face against Amelia's chest as though Amelia were the only safe place in the world. In that moment, Amelia realized the enormity of the situation as she had walked onto a simple job to help her sister, but now she was caught in the tangled threads of a family's hidden wounds, of a child's longing, and of a man's suspicion that could either destroy her or change her life forever. And as Ryan Malik's piercing eyes locked onto hers, cold yet searching, Amelia knew with a sinking heart that this was not just an ordinary day. This was the beginning of something far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more life-altering than she had ever imagined, and there would be no turning back.